The program opens with a brief look ahead to a later conversation with Malala Yousafzai, introduced simply as an activist, author and producer, and as the youngest Nobel Peace Prize laureate in history. Malala received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2014 at the age of 17 for her advocacy of girls' education and remains the youngest Nobel laureate in any category. That reminder of what a global peace prize usually represents provides a sharp contrast with the main story of the night, a new peace award created by world football's governing body FIFA and given to the current president of the United States, Donald J. Trump. The World Cup is heading to North America, jointly hosted by the United States, Canada and Mexico in 2026. Against that backdrop, FIFA has launched what it calls its inaugural Peace Prize, an award ostensibly meant to honour contributions to peace and global understanding through football. The announcement is staged with familiar pageantry, dramatic music, applause, and the kind of slow-build suspense usually reserved for the World Cup draw itself. The suspense is broken when the presenter declares that the very first FIFA Peace Prize goes to Donald J. Trump, introduced as the 45th and 47th President of the United States. Trump, who returned to the White House in January 2025 after winning the 2024 election, is now the current US President. The reaction is half disbelief, half dark comedy. The award appears tailored almost entirely around Trump's need for recognition, leading to the wry observation that this looks less like a peace prize and more like a prize created to appease him personally. On stage, Trump is handed a large, gleaming trophy and a medal, urged to wear it proudly. Instead of tucking the award away, he puts it on immediately, as if it had been something he had been waiting to display all along. The visual is meant to capture his long-documented appetite for visible symbols of status and victory. The sequence is played as satire, but it sets up a serious question. What does it mean to hail someone as a man of peace at the very moment his administration is escalating the risk of war? That question becomes unavoidable when the scene cuts from the award ceremony to news footage of the administration's policy toward Venezuela. On one screen, Trump is receiving a peace trophy. On another, analysts and reporters are describing a rapidly intensifying confrontation with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, who has ruled the country since 2013 and whose government has been widely criticized for authoritarian practices, human rights abuses, and the country's severe economic collapse. News clips describe US pressure on Maduro, talk of regime change, and reports that the United States is on the brink of a wider conflict with Venezuela. The Pentagon is described as deploying battleships to waters near Venezuela and surging thousands of troops into the region in what commentators call the largest US show of force in the Caribbean in decades. The official justification is framed as a war on narco-terrorists at sea tied to drug trafficking and fentanyl. But taken together, the build-up looks to many viewers like the early stages of a military campaign aimed at toppling a foreign government. This is particularly striking because Trump ran in both of his successful presidential campaigns on a promise to break with the era of large-scale, open-ended foreign interventions. He repeatedly attacked the Iraq War and other interventions as costly mistakes and presented himself as an America First leader who would avoid nation-building, regime change and long wars. That message resonated strongly with voters who felt betrayed by decades of conflict in the Middle East. Those non-interventionist themes are echoed in a speech by a senior defense official who attempts to reassure the public that the administration has learned the lessons of past wars. The official insists that the United States will no longer be drawn into open-ended campaigns aimed at remaking other countries. He said the War Department will not be distracted by democracy building, interventionism, undefined wars, regime change, and feckless nation building. That statement is presented as a clear break with the doctrines that guided the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. Yet almost immediately, the rhetoric surrounding Venezuela begins to drift in a familiar direction. Commentators aligned with the administration argue that this situation is fundamentally different from Iraq and that concerns about another long war are overblown. On television, a friendly host adopts a soothing, almost intimate tone, acknowledging that a lot of people are gun-shy after Iraq and saying he totally gets that. The delivery is intentionally disarming, as if comforting a nervous audience while preparing them to accept a decision that has already been made. The same host proceeds to give viewers a basic primer on Venezuela, even admitting on air that he wasn't entirely sure where the country is located on a map of South America. The moment is played for laughs, but it also exposes something more serious. Influential voices making the case for war while clearly still learning the basics about the country in question. If a broadcaster is discovering where Venezuela is in real time, how confident should viewers be in their judgment about whether launching strikes or supporting regime change is wise? The segment then turns to Maduro himself, showing footage from a rally where he moves through crowds to music that translates roughly as "No war, yes, peace." To his supporters, Maduro casts himself as a defender of national sovereignty against US interference. To his critics, both inside and outside Venezuela, he is an authoritarian leader who has presided over economic devastation, erosion of democratic institutions, and a massive exodus of citizens. On screen, though, the focus is on the optics, the choreography, the spectacle, and the way strongmen often rely on theatrical displays of strength and popular support. The program highlights how easily these images recall earlier eras. When the camera lingers on Maduro holding a ceremonial sword, wearing an ornate sash and addressing troops, the comparison with Saddam Hussein becomes visually obvious. The segment notes the uncanny resemblance between the two in their stage-managed displays: the moustache, the stiff military posture, the sword raised as a symbol of defiance. The point is not to say that the two men are identical or that the situations are identical, but to show how imagery can be used to trigger memories of past conflicts and justify new ones. The rhetoric around Venezuela further reinforces that sense of déjà vu. A pro-war voice describes a small, dilapidated boat used by drug traffickers as a floating weapon of mass destruction, raising the stakes dramatically. He said every boat carrying fentanyl and drugs of this country is a weapon of mass destruction. The phrase weapons of mass destruction is impossible to hear without recalling the central and ultimately false justification used for the invasion of Iraq in 2003. The segment then quietly introduces a key factual correction. While fentanyl is indeed a major driver of overdose deaths in the United States, public reports and law enforcement data show that the drug and its precursors are primarily produced in China and Mexico and often enter the United States through established trafficking routes involving Mexican criminal organizations, not primarily from Venezuela. By treating every vessel leaving Venezuelan waters as a weapon of mass destruction, the rhetoric slides from a genuine concern about drug trafficking into a justification for treating a foreign state as a military target. From there, the script moves into a broader examination of how arguments for war are built. Viewers are reminded that in the run-up to the Iraq War, the US administration emphasized Saddam Hussein's alleged weapons of mass destruction, his supposed links to terrorism, and the promise that removing him would transform the Middle East. Old clips show one leader declaring that Saddam posed a direct threat to the United States and its way of life. He said, "Saddam Hussein's a threat to my country, he's a threat to our way of life, he needs to go." That trio of sentences became a concise, powerful rationale for regime change. 2 decades later, similar language is being applied to Venezuela. In one segment, a leading hawk describes Maduro in existential terms. He said, "Maduro is an existential threat to the people of the United States." In another, a prominent conservative figure declares that the time for patience is over. He said, "It is time for Maduro to go. The names have changed. The region is different. But the core logic framing a foreign leader governing a troubled state as an immediate threat to American safety feels strikingly familiar." The program underscores that this is not simply about one politician's instincts, but about a broader return to ideas that once dominated Washington: preemptive war, regime change as a tool of foreign policy, and the belief that military force can remake regions in the name of democracy and security. Commentators who once argued that removing Saddam would transform the region and turn Iraq into a beacon of freedom are now talking about opportunities to transform northern South America, this time in the name of combating drugs and restoring democracy in Venezuela. The parallels grow even sharper when the discussion turns to expectations about the ease of conflict. Before the Iraq War, some advocates famously predicted that the campaign would be quick and relatively simple. The phrase cakewalk was used to suggest that Iraqi forces would crumble rapidly and that stabilizing the country would not be difficult. In the present day, similar confidence is being expressed about Venezuela, with one supporter of military action assuring viewers that a few targeted blows would be enough to force Maduro's regime to collapse. That kind of optimism, the script suggests, should be treated with deep skepticism in light of the long, painful, and still unfinished legacy of Iraq. The program then explores how even seasoned officials can blur the lines between past and present. One U.S. senator, in discussing presidential war powers and maritime strikes, slips and refers to President Bush when he clearly means President Trump, an error quickly corrected but revealing. The slip becomes a metaphor for the larger point. In the rush to justify new military action, the political class appears to be replaying arguments from the early 2000s, sometimes so closely that they literally mix up names. There is also a candid acknowledgement of interests that were officially downplayed in the Iraq debate, but are being invoked openly today. During the Iraq War's buildup, officials insisted repeatedly that the invasion had literally nothing to do with oil, despite widespread skepticism. In the case of Venezuela, however, voices close to the administration emphasize that the country has the world's largest proven oil reserves, significant gold deposits, and other valuable resources. Commentators talk openly about how American companies would benefit from a more cooperative government in Caracas. The script notes that when strategic resources are mentioned so directly, it becomes harder to accept that a potential war is purely about defending democracy or stopping drugs. At this point, the focus shifts to how the America First doctrine is being interpreted. Rather than arguing that the United States should avoid entanglements abroad, some of the president's allies insist that America must assert dominance over its own hemisphere. One senior advisor frames it this way. He said, "And America First means we need a Western hemisphere where America is dominant." Another sympathetic voice adds that if the priority is America, then foreign policy should start in our own hemisphere where we live. A third sums up the idea even more bluntly, saying America First also means the Americas first. A supportive commentator then notes, with a kind of triumphant simplicity, that South America literally has the name America in it. These lines reveal a crucial shift. In this interpretation, America First is not primarily about restraint. It is about reasserting a traditional sphere of influence over Latin America, with the United States treating events there as domestic concerns rather than foreign policy questions. That logic mirrors the way other major powers talk about their neighborhoods: Russia with Ukraine and parts of Eastern Europe, or China with Taiwan and the South China Sea. Under this view, great powers carve the world into zones of dominance, each policing its own backyard. The script warns that such a framework carries serious risks. It raises the possibility that the United States could slide from being a self-styled defender of a rules-based international order into just another power broker, negotiating tacit deals over who controls which region. It also suggests a world in which smaller states become bargaining chips in a larger game, their internal politics treated as secondary to the interests of the powers that claim them as part of their sphere. To bring home how disorienting this is, the program ends with a comic but pointed device, an imagined visit from someone who has just time-traveled from 2005, arriving in the present convinced that the Iraq War is still new and that there might still be time to stop it. The visitor is stunned to learn that the war has already happened, cost hundreds of thousands of lives, reshaped global politics, and left a lasting impact on trust in government. That person expects to be delivering a warning. Instead, he finds a world in which many of the same sales pitches for war have returned almost unchanged, this time pointed at a different country. The time traveller asks for updates on familiar cultural figures, a once revered comedian who later faced serious criminal convictions, a celebrated actor whose reputation collapsed amid sexual assault allegations, and a reality show that transformed into the launching pad for a future president. Hearing how those stories ended, he reacts as if he has landed in a dystopia. And when he is told that the man he once watched firing contestants on television is now once again president, being given peace awards while contemplating new military campaigns, the shock is complete. The humour in that closing scene softens the delivery, but it does not obscure the central point. The script is less about predicting exactly what will happen in Venezuela than about recognising familiar patterns. The elevation of a leader as a symbol of peace while his government prepares for conflict, the use of emotionally charged threats like weapons of mass destruction to justify intervention, the promise that this war will be easier and more contained than the last, and the quiet admission that strategic resources and spheres of influence are never far from the calculations. By the end, the audience is left with a straightforward question. If the world, and especially the United States, truly absorb the lessons of Iraq and other interventions, why do the arguments for a new confrontation sound so much like the ones that led to those earlier wars? The script does not offer a simple answer, but it makes clear that the stakes are high, not just for Venezuela and the wider region, but for any country that might again be told that a quick, clean military solution is the surest path to peace.